Hey guys, this is JJ Lonsdale at level 10, and we are going to talk to Kyle about how the internet broke this week.
We can do that movie. we can drop it.
I don't know. I like the home done look.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, though this is a video.
People on YouTube appreciate authenticity.
I know. We need more authenticity around here.
So what happened this week?
So what happened was there's a guy. His name is Azer, and Azer is a JavaScript developer. And what happened was there's a service or a tool called NPM, which is the Node Package Manager. And what it does is that whenever you're working on JavaScript projects, it helps you manage dependencies and libraries for tools you're building. So say if I'm working on a library and these other guys have already built tool sets that I can use, I'll just pull those in when I'm building my code, and it'll pull all dependencies, and I don't have to write that code, and I can just use it as assets for my current library.
And this is all open source, right?
This is all open source. Everything's on the internet. It's all free. It's all good to go. So what happened was Azer had written this library called Kick. So the namespace for the project was KIK, Kick. Kick is also the name of a messaging service that it's kind of like WhatsApp or something like that. It's really popular, and they were working on the library, and they saw that Kick was taken, the namespace was taken. So they wanted to take that namespace for themselves. So they contacted Azer. They said, hey, Azer, we noticed that you have built this library called Kick, and we own the name Kick, and so we'd really like to take that name back, or take that name and see if we can work something out. And he said, no.
I believe he said no in a rather rude way.
Yes, a little bit expletive there. He said no, and they said, well, if you don't, we own the trademark and the brand rights, and had a lot of legally words around it, kind of in a threatening manner, give it back. And he said, no. And then they said, surely we can do something like compensation. He said, okay, give me $30,000. Then Kick went to NPM, the source where all these libraries are hosted, and said, hey, this guy won't give us the namespace. We're trying to be reasonable, but he's not being reasonable. And there's a policy in place, and a lot of open source projects have this policy in place, where like Twitter, for example, like if you own Google, right? There are policies in place where Google can obtain that username back from anyone who registers it, because there's things like name squatting or namespace squatting and things like that go into place. And so if you are a rightful owner, you can take that back.
So in general, those kinds of rules that protect a trademark holder are generally a good thing.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what happened was Kick went to NPM. They said, NPM, we want to get our name back. He's not going to let us do it. And NPM said, well, per our guidelines, our naming guidelines, we have decided that Azer, it's in the best interest of everyone for the name to be transferred from Azer over to Kick. So what happened was NPM decided, as the organization controlling this thing, which is all open source, that he can no longer use it and transfer it over to Kick. Well, Azer, understandably, got upset that he had this project for X amount of time, and in open source, the names really don't matter. I mean, a name can mean anything. Like in terms of Kick's user, they know what Kick is. If you don't know what Kick is, it doesn't matter. Like
Sure.
It's not. I mean, Kick is just a name for anything.
And I saw several comments pointing out that the name Kick is being used in a lot of different industries, and potentially the owners of Kick could have decided that what Azer was doing was in a different industry and not have to attack him for it.
Yeah, and so what happened was they moved the name over, and Azer got upset. Now, the actual problem of them moving the name over isn't as big a deal as what the result was. So the result was that Azer got upset and said, you know what, if you're going to take my name off, I'm just going to remove all my packages from the library. And so he unpublished all of his packages. It turns out one of those packages was a dependency of a number of tools being built. So of those tools being built, when he unpublished those, when everyone else was running their builds and it was trying to reach out for this dependency, like we talked about earlier, that piece was gone. So everything was breaking. So all these tools around the world and projects and servers were breaking because he unpublished his project.
So basically, because he was upset that he'd been threatened and his namespace had been taken away, he basically said, "Okay, screw you guys. I'm taking my toys and I'm going home."
Exactly.
So when he pulled that software that had so many dependencies attached to it, what happened?
So everything broke, and everyone got really upset. So it wasn't just, it kind of called into question about how these tools are being built, right? So if you have a number of production level items that, are being used all around the world, I think one example was the tool he unpublished was called LeftPad. What LeftPad does is that it adds X number of zeros to the left side of a string. And in that case, it can be used in a number of applications, either in text applications or gaming applications or whatever. In some cases, e-commerce applications, when you're adding zeros appending to the beginning of a string, that can be a problem. Like economic damage can be caused by that. So it kind of called into question. Like this made everyone realize, oh, this can happen at any point in time.
So because one guy decided to pull this programming, a whole host of JavaScript applications across a variety of industries for a whole bunch of people involving presumably a lot of money, all just crashed. And then NPM took the unprecedented step of republishing that one particular LeftPad piece of code just so that people could keep functioning with everything that they were doing.
Right. Yeah, and actually their policy says that they do not republish unpublished things. In this one case, they did because it was such a big issue. Now, this kind of calls the whole open source philosophy into play, right? Because, as developers, like, I spend my weekend sometimes writing code because I want to contribute a tool back or I needed something, and I feel that, this is really great for me. I'm going to move this onto Drupal.org, and other people can use my module as well. So now when you have people who put in their time and money and effort into building these tools and giving them away for free, and then you have a situation like this where NPM, as the host of this code, decides, oh, this company is more important than, or this company's rights is more important than this developer's rights. I mean, you can't tell him that he can't unpublish his code, right? Because he owns it, it's his.
Yeah.
And so that kind of calls into question that, like in JavaScript, this is a big deal, but this can happen in any industry, right? So anyone on Drupal.org, for example, could go into Drupal and say, you know what, I don't like my module anymore, or I don't want to use it anymore. So they can't necessarily delete it, but they could fuddle it a lot to where it's unusable and unmaintainable. And there's luckily for us in the Drupal world, there's a process you can go through with Drupal.org. You can find abandoned modules and re-maintain them. So if I found a module that I really liked and no one's touched it in 3 years and it's been abandoned, I can go in and say, hey, I want to take care of this module because we really need it. And then they can transfer it over to me because, open source.
Because here at Level 10, we build websites for our clients. And we build them on Drupal, and Drupal is all open source, and so we use a lot of modules that other people have developed. If somebody suddenly decides to pull them or mess with them, then our clients suddenly have websites that don't work, they're angry, and we look terrible. But nevertheless, open source as a concept is a wonderful and collaborative way of getting the best products out there. And everybody can contribute. You're all building on each other. So you can do much more by standing on the shoulders of giants with everything that has happened before in open source. So what is the takeaway here? Do you think NPM just doesn't have the right procedures in place? Or is this something that we need to be worried about for the future of open source?
I think in NPM's aspect, or in this specific case with NPM, I think it kind of called into question that for them, like, oh, this can happen, and this can be a big deal. and it kind of shook the developer community a little bit, because now these people who are always contributing code and they store it on NPM, now they're like, well, they're saying that my name can be taken away at any point in time, and even though NPM says that's not the case, this was very specific. Who knows, right? Now, in terms of the open source community, this is not anything new, right? I mean, there have been a number of times when projects have been pulled or canceled or whatever that people have been working on. But since it's open source, we can always rebuild it ourselves, right? We can go look at the old source code. We can go find the old source code. We can pull it back. We can make a new repository. We can use it. In Drupal's case, it's not a big deal. If someone kills a module, we still have a copy of that module, and we're not relying on Drupal to do anything with it.
Gotcha.
But in NPM's case, it's part of the build process. So these are things that are always running and always being compiled. And there's an alternative to it called packaging. So you can actually, or bundling, where you can bundle your JavaScript. What that means is that instead of building a tool, at runtime, whatever it is, and pulling these dependencies in, I'm going to keep copies of all this code on site, so I don't have to reach out to these servers and rely on someone else to serve it up for me.
Is that a current best practice in the community?
Best practice is a relevant term, because some people agree with it, some people don't, because there's more overhead that can be involved. As not a JavaScript guy, it's hard for me to say that with certainty. But reading through different blog posts and the way people are implementing these technically, it can go either or. But JavaScript is such a young community, especially in the past 5 years. Like, so much has happened in the past 5 years that people are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
I saw one comment that I thought was fascinating, where somebody said, what was originally a naming dispute has become a referendum on the viability of NPM. Their public reputation, the organization, the people in the organization, the lack of governance, and so on. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of concerned now, because in Azer's case, Azer said, you know what, I'm not going to work with NPM anymore. I completely lost trust in them. I'm moving all my stuff over to GitHub. And I think that a lot of people are probably have a bad taste in their mouth about this, especially if you're an open source developer. Now,
yes.
In some cases, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today. He said, I don't see a problem with that. Like, he goes, people do this all the time. Like, naming rights in the world are apparently important to people, but it's only important to companies. But when you're working with individuals, we take pride in our work, and so it's hard to just rip that out from someone and not feel like you've been burned. So I think in this case, NPM has they're going to be looking carefully about how this affects their business model, and I'm interested to see what they do to fix it.
One thing that I liked was that the people at Kik posted a blog post sort of telling their side of the story, and they showed everybody all of the emails that had gone back and forth between them and Azer about this. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, really clear that they both acted badly. So I appreciated their transparency mm-hmm. in showing us the places where they should have acted better as well.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing here is a culture clash between the open source developer, programmer, coder community, which can often have a little bit of a libertarian streak running through it, coming up against more traditional corporate America, mm-hmm. which the tools that they have to respond to these things, they're the only tools a company has to say, patent infringement, trademark, blah, 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 lawyers. Those are the only tools they have, and they're absolutely the wrong set of tools mm-hmm. when trying to engage in a dialogue with the JavaScript open source community.
Yeah. Yeah, I no comment.
All right. That's all I needed.
Is that it?
That's
okay.
it.
Wow.
Bye.